My son waited until I was kneeling at my wife's grave to steal the only place where her voice still lived. When I returned home, there was no broken lock and no house, only a rectangular wound in the earth where 46 years of marriage had stood that morning. Please, before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you are listening from today. Daniel volunteered to drive me to the cemetery on the first anniversary of Eleanor's death. That should have warned me. For months, he avoided his mother's name. Yet that morning, he arrived with lilies and my coffee prepared perfectly. I mistook guilt for kindness. At the grave, wind lifted the ribbon from Eleanor's flowers. I knelt to secure it while Daniel checked his phone. "Take your time, Dad. I'll get fresh coffee." His car started before I answered. 40 minutes passed. My calls went to voicemail as rain darkened the headstone. Frank Collins, the groundskeeper, found me under an oak. "Your ride returning?" I looked at the empty road. He must have had an emergency. Frank drove me. As we turned onto Hawthorne Lane, neighbors stood along the road. Clara Bennett covered her mouth when she saw me. Beyond her was open sky, where my upstairs windows belonged. My house was gone. Not damaged or demolished. Gone. The chimney, porch, and window where Eleanor waved had vanished. Bare foundation walls enclosed an empty basement. Pipes rose from concrete like broken bones. Tire tracks crossed Eleanor's flowers and continued toward the county road. I sank beside the foundation. Eleanor's coat, glasses, and our wedding album had all been inside. Now everything was wherever my son believed memories could be sold. Clara ran over. "Walter," I tried calling. "When?" "They came before sunrise. Daniel said you approved it." "Approved what?" "Moving the house." A two-story craftsman does not vanish in hours unless someone prepares for weeks. Then I saw it. Cleanly cut foundation bolts, tagged utility lines, and channels carved for steel beams. Daniel had said the crews outside were repairing drainage. I had served those men lemonade while they prepared to lift my life from the ground. Clara showed me her doorbell video. My home rode on hydraulic dollies while Daniel walked beside it in a reflective vest, guiding traffic like an owner. At 9:14, while I spoke to Eleanor at her grave, the house turned onto the county road. A truck followed bearing the name Reed Structural Relocation. Daniel showed permits bearing my signature. He said I donated the house and entered assisted living because I was unsafe alone. My phone rang. "Dad, let me explain. Where is my house?" "Safe. A gas inspection found danger beneath the foundation. Why abandon me at the cemetery?" I arranged a ride. Frank shook his head. Nobody had called him. "Bring it back." Daniel sighed. "A house isn't a person. Mom is gone. Keeping everything she touched will not bring her back." The cruelty was not saying Eleanor was gone. It was rehearsing the sentence until theft sounded like medicine. "Where are you?" I asked. "Handling the emergency you refused to face." A heavy engine sounded behind him. Then a man shouted, "Empty the old man's bedroom before the auction inventory arrives." Daniel ended the call. Clara and Frank heard it. The house itself was only the first theft. Someone was already dividing everything inside. Clara pointed to a red survey stake beside the foundation. A sleeve held a notice stamped "Final Site Delivery 30 days." Beneath it was a price, $3,800,000. The buyer was Reed Development. Daniel had not moved my home to protect me from danger. Someone wanted the land beneath my memories delivered empty. Then Frank noticed a muddy object near the severed water line. It was Eleanor's brass house key, bent almost in half. A strip of blue tape was wrapped around it with 3 words in Daniel's handwriting: "No longer needed." I closed my fist around the key. My son had left it behind because he believed a man without a house no longer needed a way inside. He was about to learn that ownership is not erased by distance, and grief is not permission to steal from the living. Clara called the sheriff while I remained beside the open foundation. "The deed is inside my house," I said. Harris contacted County Dispatch and requested an emergency stop on the moving permit, but the answer hardened his face. The county system said I had signed a relocation agreement 6 weeks earlier. It claimed an underground gas leak had made my home unsafe. A second document appointed Daniel as my temporary representative. I never signed either one. Harris showed me the copies. The signature resembled mine, even the upward stroke Eleanor used to tease me about. Whoever forged it had practiced. Daniel called again. I put him on speaker. Dad, the sheriff cannot help you. Everything was approved. Then tell us where the house is. Silence. Us? Deputy Harris is listening. Daniel's voice instantly softened. Officer, my father is confused. His grief has worsened. We moved him for his safety. You left him at a cemetery, Harris replied. A medical transport was supposed to collect him. Which company? Daniel ended the call. Dispatch found the engineer who had declared the property dangerous. Nolan Price. He works for Reed Development. The buyer had identified the hazard, approved the removal, and prepared to receive the cleared land. It was a circle designed to approve its own lie. Harris warned that suspicion alone would not stop a permitted convoy. Until a judge intervened, my house could keep moving. Then Clara remembered Daniel asking whether her camera recorded the road. That one lie saved us all. Her footage showed him bribing a county inspector. A white van followed the house. Its logo belonged to Havenbrook Senior Living. He had sent one to take me. I called Havenbrook. Mr. Hale, the receptionist said. Your son reported that you wandered away during transport. I never agreed to live there. We have your signed admission contract and a physician's assessment. The assessment came from Dr. Marcus Vale, whom I had never met. It described confusion, aggression, and an unhealthy attachment to my dead wife's belongings. Who paid the deposit? I asked. Your family trust. I had no family trust. Harris recorded her answer. Then the county gas supervisor called. No leak had ever been reported at my address. More damaging still, my house did not use natural gas. Eleanor and I had installed electric heating 27 years ago. Harris issued an alert for the convoy, but the relocation company refused to reveal its destination without a warrant. Frank found packing paper beneath a crushed rosebush. Printed across it were the words, Hale, Estate, Auction, and a lot number. The sale was scheduled for the next morning, not 30 days away. Clara found the auction preview online. Eleanor's sewing machine, our dining table, my father's watch, and the rocking chair where she once held Daniel were listed with prices. They had photographed a lifetime as if it belonged to a dead stranger. The final image showed a locked cedar chest, labeled Contents Unknown. Inside were Eleanor's letters, our original property records, and the last card she wrote before cancer stole her voice. Stop the auction, I told Harris. He called the district attorney. Before anyone answered, the listing refreshed. A new photograph showed Daniel beside the chest holding bolt cutters. Beneath it was a message posted seconds earlier. Owner, authorized, immediate opening. My son was not waiting for the sale. He was hunting for something inside his mother's chest. I touched the bent key in my pocket and remembered Eleanor's final lucid night. She had gripped my wrist and whispered, If Daniel ever asks about the ground beneath the house, do not answer him. Open the blue envelope first. I had believed fever caused those words. Now Daniel had stolen the chest containing that envelope. The empty foundation, the false diagnosis, and the auction were not separate betrayals. They were pieces of one plan, and my dead wife had seen it forming before I did. The district attorney obtained a temporary order freezing the auction, but the order reached the warehouse 9 minutes too late. Daniel had already cut the cedar chest open. The live stream ended before we saw what he removed. Instead, the clerk placed a folder before me containing 27 pages signed in my name. There was a relocation contract, a medical power of attorney, an application to dissolve my homestead protection, and instructions transferring any sale proceeds into the Hale Family Preservation Trust. Its trustee was Daniel. If I entered assisted living or was declared incompetent, Daniel could approve the land sale without asking me again. The seal belonged to Marjorie Bell, a retired notary who had died 4 months earlier. One page read, Spousal Consent. Eleanor's signature appeared beneath a statement surrendering her marital claim to the property. The document was dated February 18, 8 months after I buried her. Daniel had not only forged his father's name, he had made his dead mother participate in stealing her own home. It looked convincing from a distance, but Daniel had copied the wrong version. Eleanor signed legal papers as Eleanor, May Hale. The forgery, said Eleanor M. Hale, the name she used on birthday cards. Probably a card or letter. Harris looked toward the locked chest in the auction photograph. Daniel had been searching for the originals because they could expose the source of his forgery. Every document had been uploaded from the same law office, Mercer, Vale, and Reed. Dr. Marcus Vale, the physician who claimed I was incompetent, was a partner's brother. Daniel's wife, Rebecca, had worked at that office for 7 years. She helped us organize the funeral, I said. She took the insurance forms, tax files, and death certificates home so I would not have to face them. Grief had made me grateful for the hands emptying my desk. The county clerk then noticed a scanning error. On the final page, a faint line remained from the document placed beneath it. She enhanced the image. A different heading emerged. Option to purchase North Access Corridor. The agreement promised Daniel $280,000 when the land was delivered vacant, and another $420,000 after construction approval. He was not inheriting my property. He was being paid to erase me from it. The agreement also imposed a penalty of $10,000 for every day the site remained occupied after Eleanor's anniversary. Daniel had chosen the day I mourned his mother because delaying one more morning would cost him money. Harris requested a warrant for Mercer, Vale, and Reed, but a judge would need stronger proof connecting Daniel to the forged uploads. Clara's camera had captured Daniel, leaving my property 3 nights earlier with a flat metal case. The cedar chest had been sealed when their staff arrived. Only Daniel possessed the key until he claimed it was lost. Yet the bent key in my pocket did not fit that chest. It fit Eleanor's small document box, which had always remained inside the cedar chest beneath her letters. If the blue envelope was still inside that smaller box, he could not open it without the key he discarded at the foundation. She had wrapped the key in blue tape so I would connect it to the envelope. Daniel believed the key opened the house, but Eleanor had changed the lock months before her death. Harris's phone rang. The chest stood open, letters scattered across the floor, but the metal document box was gone. Security footage showed Rebecca carrying it through a rear door while Daniel argued with the manager. Husband and wife were no longer moving together. Seconds later, an unknown number sent me a photograph of the unopened blue box on a passenger seat. Beneath it were 6 words. Your wife knew. Come without the police. The message included an address beside the river and a deadline of 40 minutes. Harris told me it was a trap. I agreed. What I did not tell him was that I recognized the quilt beneath the box. Eleanor had sewn it for Rebecca when she married Daniel. My daughter-in-law was not asking me to surrender. She was asking me to learn why my wife had spent her final months preparing for betrayal inside her own family. Harris refused to let me approach the river alone. He followed in an unmarked car and stopped 2 blocks away, while I entered an abandoned boat repair shop. Rebecca stood beneath a broken light, with Eleanor's blue document box pressed against her chest. Her face was bruised near the jaw. Daniel did that? I asked. Before I give you this, you need to understand why he moved the house. $700,000. That is only Daniel's payment. Rebecca opened her phone and showed me a development map. My narrow property touched the state highway and contained the only route wide enough for the company's heavy trucks. Without it, Reed would need to build a bridge over protected wetlands, adding 4 years and nearly $60 million to the project. My land was not worth $3.8 million because of the house. It was worth that much because nothing else could replace its location. He promised them you would sell after Eleanor died. He promised my grief would make me obedient. At first, he believed it would. Reed offered him a commission, but I refused every conversation about selling. Then Daniel learned he could deliver the land without my consent if a doctor declared me incapable and a trust held my assets. You forged my name. I copied documents. I did not sign them. You took Eleanor's records after her funeral. Rebecca looked down. She explained that attorney Charles Mercer created the false trust. Dr. Vale produced the capacity assessment. Nolan Price arranged the permits, and a county inspector named Owen Pike accepted cash to approve the non-existent gas leak. Why turn against him now? I asked. Rebecca touched the bruise. Because yesterday I found a second contract. Once the land transferred, Daniel would receive his payment, divorce her, and accuse her of creating every forged document. Daniel intended to buy freedom with her prison sentence, just as he bought the development deal with my home. I unlocked the blue box with Eleanor's bent key. Inside lay a handwritten letter, an old survey, and a small voice recorder. "You have taken enough from my wife." I played the recording. "Walter, if you are hearing this, Daniel has asked about the northern boundary again. Do not blame yourself for trusting him. I wanted to believe him too." I closed my eyes. Eleanor said Daniel had visited during her treatments and pressured her to sign a sale option. When she refused, he brought Rebecca with papers disguised as insurance forms. Eleanor secretly copied them and contacted a land attorney. The original survey proved our northern field contained the highway access Reed needed, but it also revealed an older restriction recorded by Eleanor's grandfather. No commercial road could cross the field without the consent of the Hale Conservation Association. Eleanor answered from the recorder, "Walter, you are its only surviving trustee." Daniel had researched the deed but missed the separate covenant stored under Eleanor's maiden name. The $3.8 million agreement was built on property Daniel could deliver, but a road he could not. Rebecca sank onto a chair. "If Reed discovers this, Daniel loses everything." "No," I said. Eleanor described overhearing Daniel ask Dr. Vale how quickly grief-related confusion could justify emergency guardianship. The answer was 72 hours if I appeared homeless, disoriented, or dangerous. Moving my house created all three conditions. Its locked memory wing would prevent me from attending the guardianship hearing. After 30 days, Daniel planned to petition the court to sell my assets for medical expenses. My son had not taken my home because he wanted me somewhere safer. He took it so my absence would become proof that I could no longer protect myself. A vehicle stopped outside. Through a crack in the wall, I saw Daniel step from his car with Nolan Price. Harris had warned me not to reveal his position, so I kept my eyes on the blue box. "Dad." Rebecca is frightened and confused. "Give me Mom's papers, and we can end this without anyone getting hurt." "You already hurt everyone." Nolan locked the door behind him. Daniel placed the folder on the bench. It was an emergency guardianship petition signed that afternoon. Attached was a new statement claiming I had threatened Rebecca with a weapon and abducted her from the auction site. He had stolen my house in the morning. By sunset, he was preparing to steal my name, my freedom, and the legal right to tell anyone what he had done. Daniel pushed the guardianship petition toward me. "Sign the acknowledgement, Dad. Havenbrook can give you a room tonight. And if I refuse?" Nolan stepped between me and the door. "Then Rebecca tells the court you threatened her." Daniel turned to his wife. "Tell him." Rebecca stared at the bruise he had left on her face, then at the blue box. "Walter never threatened me." Daniel's smile vanished. "Think carefully. I finally am." She raised her phone and revealed that our conversation had been recording since before they entered. Harris struck the locked door from outside and shouted his name. Nolan fled through a rear window while Daniel grabbed the blue box, shoved Rebecca into the workbench, and escaped through a side exit. Daniel had taken the survey, but Rebecca still had the recorder in her coat. Eleanor had attached a tracking tag beneath its lining after Daniel first searched her room. Harris radioed the route to patrol units, but Daniel abandoned his car beneath an overpass. The survey was gone, and the tracking tag had been torn out. He had not noticed the second signal. Before meeting me, Rebecca had slipped one of her own trackers inside the lining of his jacket. It traveled for 47 miles, then stopped at an abandoned orchard outside Millstone. Harris could not enter without a warrant, and Daniel's false allegation made the district attorney cautious. Rebecca solved that problem by signing a sworn confession. She admitted copying Eleanor's records, preparing trust drafts, and arranging contact between Daniel and Mercer. We reached the orchard after midnight. Rows of dead apple trees surrounded a packing barn, 2 storage sheds, and, behind them, my house. It stood on steel supports like a captive animal, whole but separated from every root that had made it ours. A relocation beam had torn through the rose trellis she planted on our 30th anniversary. Inside, every room had been violated with neat efficiency. Eleanor's clothing filled plastic bags labeled textiles, no value. Our wedding photographs lay face down in a crate. Someone had written Lot 114 across the back of her portrait. I lifted it and saw a boot print over her smile. On the refrigerator, Daniel had left the grocery list Eleanor wrote before her final hospital stay. Beside her handwriting, an auction clerk had placed a $5 sticker. Watching strangers assign prices to a life teaches you how completely greed misunderstands love. Rebecca found the auction ledger in Daniel's study. The sale was only a cover. Most valuable items had already been promised to private buyers connected to Reed. My father's watch was assigned to Owen Pike. Eleanor's jewelry was listed as a consulting gift for Dr. Vale's wife. Daniel had paid every participant with pieces of the family he was destroying. Harris photographed the ledger, then noticed an empty line beside Lot 001, Original Hail Covenant delivered to N. Price before 6 a.m. He still did not understand that the survey was only a map. The binding covenant remained elsewhere. A noise came from upstairs. Officers surrounded the staircase and found Mason Reed, Nolan's younger brother, crawling from the attic with a canvas bag. Inside were Eleanor's recorder, Daniel's burner phone, and a folder containing route permits. Mason claimed Daniel paid him to remove anything linking Reed to the house. Harris opened the burner phone. Its last message had been sent 10 minutes earlier to Nolan. They found the orchard. Burn it before dawn. Another reply followed while we watched. Fuel is already in the south shed. Rebecca whispered. Daniel knows the covenant may still be inside. Harris ordered everyone outside and requested fire investigators. I refused to leave until I checked one place. Behind a loose baseboard in our bedroom, Eleanor had kept a narrow compartment for emergency cash. The cash remained, but beside it lay a child's red compass that had belonged to Daniel. Beneath the compass was a note in Eleanor's handwriting. Walter, the house must not return to Hawthorne until you know who can be trusted. A folded receipt showed she had paid 6 months in advance to store something at Millstone Community Bank. The receipt included a box number and a warning. Release only if the house leaves its foundation. Eleanor had predicted not merely that Daniel would betray us, but that he would move the house to search it. Before I could show Harris, the orchard lights went out. An engine roared beyond the trees. Then the south shed erupted in flame, and burning fuel began running downhill toward my home. Fire raced through the dead grass faster than we could run. I would not let Daniel turn her warning into ash. Flames reached the rose trellis, climbed one post, and blackened the railing before the first water struck. Fire investigators found a remote igniter in the shed and tire marks leading toward the western gate. A traffic unit stopped Nolan 7 miles away. Daniel was not with him. Nolan demanded an attorney, but his phone connected the order to my son. The message read, "If the old man gets the covenant, we all lose. Make sure nothing survives." "There is more," she said. At the sheriff's office, she gave a recorded statement without asking for a deal. When Eleanor learned about the access road, Daniel began visiting her alone, telling her I would waste our savings and lose the home anyway. He asked her to sign because he wanted one good decision before the medication ruined her mind. Rebecca had believed his story that we were broke. Daniel simply wanted the commission to cover gambling losses and a private loan he had hidden from her. $940,000. The development payment would not make him wealthy. Rebecca admitted she copied my signature from Christmas checks and Eleanor's from a birthday card. He added the guardianship plan, the medical assessment, and the auction after I refused to sell. "Why didn't you warn us?" My voice sounded quieter than anger. Because every step made the previous one harder to confess. She began by protecting her marriage, then protected herself, and finally helped Daniel erase me because admitting the truth would expose everything she had already done. Rebecca handed Harris a memory card hidden inside her phone case. "Once the house is gone, he has nowhere to return," Daniel said. "He'll look confused because he will be confused." Havenbrook signs the intake report. You confirm incapacity, and the judge sees a homeless widower clinging to dead furniture. Nobody asks why he is homeless. Vale asked what would happen if I refused transport. Leave him at the cemetery. He'll either call us or wander. Both help the petition. I pressed my palms against the table. The recording proved he had planned every minute of my humiliation. It was a stage on which Daniel intended me to appear helpless. Nolan asked, "What if your father recognizes the signatures?" Daniel replied, "People believe documents before they believe old men." Harris paused the recording. "This establishes conspiracy, fraud, elder abuse, and attempted arson. But we still need Daniel." Rebecca knew where he would go. The creditors held a security interest in his payment, and Daniel kept emergency cash at a hunting cabin near Lake Mercer. Yet she warned that arresting him now might leave Charles Mercer free to destroy the law firm's server and file the guardianship petition before morning. Harris coordinated warrants for the cabin, law office, Havenbrook, and Dr. Vale's clinic. Before officers departed, Rebecca played one final file. Daniel was speaking to someone whose voice I recognized immediately. Lillian Cross, the judge assigned to my emergency guardianship hearing. "Have him brought in sedated," she said. "A quiet man looks incompetent if everyone else speaks for him," Daniel answered. "And after you sign, Reed releases the first payment. Your father will never see Hawthorne Lane again." The corruption reached beyond my family, beyond the developer, and into the courtroom meant to protect me. Then the desk officer brought me an envelope recovered from Nolan's truck. Across the front, Daniel had written Dad's final options. Inside were two forms. One surrendered the conservation trusteeship. A handwritten note promised that if I signed, Daniel would return Eleanor's ashes. My stomach tightened. Her urn had been on our bedroom mantel when the house moved. The inventory did not list it. Daniel had taken the last physical piece of my wife and turned even that into leverage. Rebecca looked at the empty line beneath my name. "He said the cabin was for money." "No," I replied. "He went there because he knows I will follow Eleanor." At that moment, my phone received a photograph of her urn sitting beside a shotgun. Daniel's message contained only an address and 4 words: "Come alone or lose her." Daniel gave me 30 minutes to reach the cabin. Harris wanted a tactical team to surround it, but I knew my son would watch the road. "He expects an old man ruled by grief," I said. Eleanor's urn rested on the porch rail. Daniel waited behind it with a shotgun, and the stolen survey folded inside his coat. "Sign the trusteeship release," Daniel said, pushing a clipboard toward me with his boot. "Then take Mom home." "Which home?" His eyes shifted. "You made this harder than it had to be. You left me beside her grave. I left you somewhere safe. You used your mother's grave to make me look lost." Daniel tightened, his grip on the gun. "I needed one clean day." I asked why he took Eleanor's ashes. "Because you never listened to me while she was alive. I knew you would listen if I held what was left." Those words severed the final thread between the child I raised and the man before me. I signed nothing. Instead, I told him about the Millstone bank receipt. "Give me the receipt. Return her first." He lowered the shotgun long enough to lift the urn. Harris's voice came from the trees. "Daniel, place the weapon on the ground." Daniel seized the urn and backed toward the lake. "Come closer," and she goes through the ice. I believed him. I removed the bank receipt and held it above the lantern. "Drop her, and this burns." For several seconds, father and son stood threatening to destroy the only pieces of Eleanor the other could not replace. Then Daniel set the urn on the snow and reached for the receipt. The shotgun fired into the roof. I fell beside the urn and held it against my chest while officers handcuffed my son. Daniel looked at me from the ground. "You chose papers over me." "No," I said. "You chose money over everyone." Before dawn, state investigators suspended Judge Cross and seized Mercer's servers. Dr. Vale was arrested for falsifying capacity reports, and Havenbrook surrendered intake records showing 5 other older residents admitted through similar emergency petitions. At 9, Harris accompanied me and Eleanor's attorney, Miriam Cole, to Millstone Community Bank. The manager opened safe deposit box 417. Eleanor had stored the original conservation covenant, a notarized amendment, photographs of Daniel meeting Nolan, and a sealed statement recorded 2 weeks before her death. The amendment named me lifetime trustee and specified that incapacity could be determined only by 3 independent physicians chosen by the State Conservation Board. No relative, private doctor, or emergency guardian could surrender the restriction. Her recorded statement explained the final secret. Eleanor had renewed it 6 months before her death and transferred its enforcement rights to the county land trust. If Reed attempted construction, the county could reclaim the northern field for $1 and permanently bar commercial access. Daniel had moved the house from land he could never sell for its promised purpose. The forged documents did not create a valuable deal. They triggered the clause that destroyed it. Within an hour, the company withdrew from the purchase, froze Nolan's accounts, and reported Mercer's side agreement to federal investigators. Daniel's expected payment disappeared. Yet Eleanor's box held one more item, the original floor plan of our house. A red mark appeared beneath the sewing room, beside a note in her handwriting, "Second original, under the north floorboard." The bank covenant protected the land, but Eleanor had hidden a duplicate inside the house in case Daniel found the box first. That explained why he ordered the fire. He knew from her old renovation notes that a compartment existed beneath the sewing room, though he did not know which board concealed it. Harris called the orchard. An officer answered, breathless. The fire had been controlled, but Mason Reed had escaped custody during the evacuation. A camera now showed him entering my house with a pry bar and a gasoline can. Daniel, seated across from us in the interview room, heard the call through the open door. He smiled. "You saved the urn, Dad. You won't save what she buried." I leaned close enough for him to see that fear no longer controlled me. "Your mother expected both of you." On Eleanor's floor plan, a second red line ran from the sewing room compartment to the orchard's old irrigation valve. The hiding place was not merely a box beneath a board. It was the center of a trap she had designed before her hands became too weak to sew. The orchard was 20 minutes away, but Mason needed less than 5 to destroy a floor. The irrigation valve, connected to an underground cistern built when the orchard still operated. A handwritten instruction appeared beside it. "Turn left, twice before lifting board." We drove through the orchard gate as smoke began curling from an upstairs window. Mason had poured gasoline along the hallway and stacked Eleanor's dresses beside the stairs. Mason answered by firing a nail gun through the sewing room door. Harris instructed a firefighter to reach the outdoor valve and turn it left twice. Inside, Mason wedged his pry bar beneath the marked board. The moment it lifted, water exploded upward through a narrow copper pipe. Eleanor had filled the isolated line with bright violet survey dye, harmless but almost impossible to wash away. An alarm sounded throughout the orchard. Floodlights illuminated every exit, and steel fire shutters descended over the sewing room windows. Mason tried to ignite the gasoline, but the dye water had flooded the floor and soaked the dresses in the hallway. They arrested him, carrying the duplicate covenant in a plastic sleeve. His hands, the document, and the gasoline can were stained the same violet color. Yet Mason had not acted alone. Officers found a wireless earpiece beneath his collar. Daniel had been guiding him from the interview room through a phone hidden in the lining of his jacket. When Harris removed the phone, the active call displayed Charles Mercer's number. State investigators listened as Mercer whispered, "If Mason fails, destroy the server and use Cross to release Daniel before arraignment." Harris answered, "Judge Cross is already in custody." Mercer hung up. Cloud backups recovered every document, including payments to Dr. Vale, Judge Cross, Nolan Price, and Owen Pike. His confidence broke when officers carried in the violet-stained covenant. Miriam placed the bank original beside it. They matched page for page. Daniel demanded to speak with Judge Cross. Harris told him she had requested her own attorney. Mercer was being transported in handcuffs. Then he looked at Rebecca. "Tell them Dad manipulated you." Rebecca removed her wedding ring and placed it on the table. "You taught me what manipulation looks like." Daniel turned to me. His voice became small. "Dad, say this was a family misunderstanding. I remembered teaching him to ride a bicycle in the same driveway he sold beneath me. I remembered Eleanor staying awake beside him through fevers and defending him after every failure. Love offered me 1,000 reasons to soften the truth. None of them required me to lie. You left me at your mother's grave so strangers could take my home," I said. "That was not a misunderstanding." Daniel began crying, but his tears were for the prison cell approaching him, not for the father sitting across the table. Harris formally arrested him for conspiracy, fraud, kidnapping, elder abuse, arson, witness intimidation, and theft. Rebecca was arrested too. Her cooperation would matter later, but confession did not erase participation. I watched officers lead them through different doors. The family that arrived at Eleanor's funeral together had now been divided by evidence she gathered while dying. At sunrise, I returned to the orchard. Firefighters had saved the house, though the porch and south siding were blackened. The sewing room smelled of wet wood and violet dye. Beneath the raised floorboard lay the duplicate covenant, Eleanor's sewing journal, and an envelope addressed to my son. Daniel had never known about it. Harris allowed me to open it because investigators had photographed every page. Eleanor's letter did not accuse him. She wrote about the boy who rescued injured birds, the teenager who returned a wallet filled with cash, and the young man who once promised never to value property above people. Then her words changed. Daniel, if you are reading this because you lifted the floor, you have already chosen the land over your father. I left you no money here. I left you the last honest version of yourself. Decide whether he is dead too. I sat on the stained floor until sunlight reached her empty chair. Even at the end, Eleanor had prepared two outcomes: a trap for the criminal Daniel might become, and a door for the son she still hoped would return. He had stepped over the door and reached for the money. Harris entered carrying a sealed evidence bag. Inside was the blue-taped key Daniel discarded at the foundation. The prosecutor wants to know what this opens. I looked toward the sewing room compartment. It opened the truth. Outside, tow crews prepared to stabilize the house. Then a structural engineer approached with news I did not expect. Returning the building to Hawthorne Lane could destroy it. The first move had cracked its central beam, and the burned foundation at the orchard now supported the only safe position. If I insisted on taking it home, I might lose it completely. Daniel had failed to steal my house, but he had damaged it so deeply that it might never return to the land where Eleanor and I built our life. Justice had arrived. Restoration had not. The case did not begin with a trial. It began with people who had spent years believing no one would listen. After Havenbrook's records became public, 11 families contacted investigators. Their parents had been declared incompetent by Dr. Vale, placed in locked rooms, and stripped of homes through trusts prepared by Mercer's office. My stolen house was not their first operation. The prosecutor played his own words. Once the house is gone, he has nowhere to return. No creditor had instructed him to abandon me at a grave. Rebecca pleaded guilty to forgery, conspiracy, and attempted financial exploitation of an elder. The judge credited her cooperation, but reminded her that remorse beginning after betrayal reaches you is not the same as innocence. She received 4 years in prison and an order to repay every victim whose records she helped alter. Dr. Vale lost his medical license before pleading guilty. At trial, Daniel's attorney displayed photographs of the damaged house and called the relocation an act of preservation. The jury heard the fake gas report, the Havenbrook intake call, the auction ledger, the cabin threat, and his instructions to burn the covenant. Then prosecutors played Eleanor's letter. The courtroom remained silent after her voice said, "I left you the last honest version of yourself." Daniel stared at the table. I could not tell whether he was grieving her or realizing that 12 jurors had just met the mother he betrayed. I testified on the 4th day. Daniel looked older behind the defense table, but I refused to confuse damage with change. His lawyer asked whether I still loved my son. Yes. He asked whether love required forgiveness. But forgiveness does not require me to lie, and it does not protect him from consequences. The prosecutor asked what Daniel had taken. I could have listed the house, papers, ashes, and furniture. Instead, I said, he tried to take my right to be believed. Several jurors lowered their eyes. Older people are often robbed twice, first of their property, then of credibility when they protest. Daniel had built his entire plan upon that second theft. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. It found him guilty on every count except kidnapping, which required proof that Havenbrook had physically confined me. The judge sentenced him to 18 years, ordered restitution, and prohibited him from managing another person's finances after release. Before sentencing, Daniel asked to speak. Dad, I know you think I chose money over you, but I was trying to save my family. Which family? I asked from the gallery. He had no answer. His final request was that I return Eleanor's letter. The court had admitted a copy, so the original remained mine. I told him I would preserve it until he could read it without searching for money between the lines. Reed paid for stabilizing the house and restoring every recoverable item. The company also funded legal reviews for the Havenbrook families, not from kindness, but because cooperation reduced its liability. Instead, the civil judgment transferred the abandoned orchard to me and placed $3.8 million into a restitution fund for the other victims. Hawthorne Lane remained mine under the conservation covenant. Yet victory felt quieter than people imagine. On the afternoon Daniel entered prison, I sat on the scorched porch with Eleanor's urn beside me. I had won every legal battle and still had no son to call. Grief does not disappear when the guilty person is punished. It merely becomes honest. Rebecca wrote from prison asking me to visit. I did not answer immediately. 7 months later, Daniel's letter arrived with 3 sentences. I read Mom's letter. I hated her for writing it. Now, I hate that she was right. I put it beside the blue-taped key. It was no apology, but it was the first thing he had written without asking me for something. Miriam asked whether I wanted the house restored at the orchard or dismantled and rebuilt at Hawthorne Lane. The engineer warned that moving it again could split the frame beyond repair. I looked through the kitchen window toward rows of dead trees. The place chosen to hide my home had become the only place capable of holding it safely. For the first time, I considered that returning was not always the same as healing. Sometimes preserving what remains requires building a future, somewhere you never chose. I kept the house at the orchard. Moving it again would have satisfied my longing for one afternoon and risked destroying 46 years forever. So we repaired it where Daniel had hidden it. One blackened porch post remained sealed beneath clear varnish, and a violet stain stayed beneath the sewing room rug. A home that survives betrayal should not be forced to pretend nothing happened. The dead apple trees came down in winter. In spring, volunteers from the Havenbrook families planted maples, vegetable beds, and a path wide enough for wheelchairs. We named the property Eleanor House, not because she had been its victim, but because she had protected people she would never meet. The upstairs rooms became free weekend lodging for husbands, wives, and adult children caring for relatives with dementia. Trained nurses stayed with their loved ones, while caregivers sat on Eleanor's porch, walked beside the lake, or closed a bedroom door without fearing someone needed them. Eleanor's $5 grocery list remained on the refrigerator, framed beneath a sentence she often used: "Value is not the same as price." Rebecca's restitution payments helped fund legal clinics that reviewed guardianship papers for older residents. I still had not decided whether to visit her. Accountability can open a door, but the person harmed is not required to walk through it before feeling safe. Hawthorne Lane changed too. I transferred the northern field to the county land trust permanently. Where our house once stood, we built a memorial garden surrounded by Eleanor's roses. Its original stones carried the names of the 11 Havenbrook families, and every resident later restored to legal independence. At the center stood no statue, only a bench facing the rectangular outline where my life had been lifted from the earth. On the first anniversary of the theft, I placed Eleanor's urn there at sunrise. "They did not erase us," I told her. "They only changed where our love could be useful," Daniel wrote every month. In the 11th month, a thin envelope arrived containing no argument. He described joining a prison program that helped inmates identify elderly relatives targeted by financial scams. He wrote, "I used your age to make people doubt you. Now I understand that was the cruelest thing I did." I read that sentence 3 times. It now acknowledged the wound he had spent years denying. I mailed him a copy of Eleanor's letter, not the original, along with one sentence: "Change is proved by what you do when no one you love is watching." 6 months later, I agreed to a supervised video call. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Dad, I am sorry." I answered, "I believe you are sorry today. We will see who you choose to become tomorrow." Forgiveness was not a bridge I crossed in one dramatic moment. It was a gate I could open a few inches without surrendering the key. I did not change my will or reduce his restitution. I promised only that if his actions remained honest, I would keep listening. That boundary was not revenge. It was the shape love took after trust had been broken. 3 years after the house disappeared, Eleanor House welcomed its 1,000th family. The caregiver was a 72-year-old woman named Ruth, who had looked after her husband alone since his stroke. When a nurse told her she could rest, Ruth began crying because nobody had asked what she needed. In 6 years, I gave her Eleanor's old room. That evening, she joined me on the porch and noticed the burned post. "Why didn't you replace it?" "Because surviving is part of its beauty." She nodded as if the house had answered a question she could not ask. Beyond us, new apple trees stood where the dead orchard had been. Children of the Havenbrook victims hung blue ribbons from their branches, each ribbon bearing the name of someone whose voice had once been dismissed. The wind moved through them like quiet applause. My home never returned to Hawthorne Lane, but neither did I lose everything inside it. A house is not its foundation, just as a family is not the person who harms it. It is what we choose to protect, what we refuse to repeat, and what we build from the rooms left standing. On Thanksgiving, I carried Eleanor's urn from the memorial garden to the orchard. Clara, Frank, Harris, Miriam, the nurses, and several families filled the dining room. One chair remained empty beside mine. It was not reserved for Daniel. It belonged to grief, which had earned a place at the table but no longer controlled the meal. Before dinner, I placed the bent brass key beneath Eleanor's framed grocery list. It no longer opened a lock. It reminded me that the day my son believed I had nowhere to return was the day I discovered home had never been the thing he could move. Home was the truth I defended, the dignity I reclaimed, and the good we created from what he tried to destroy. My son took my house while I knelt at my wife's grave. He expected the empty ground to silence me. Instead, it gave hundreds of forgotten people a place where they would finally be heard.